Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barner. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Paul Nilsen. Paul is the Director of Procurement at Douglas Elliman Real Estate and a reader, my favorite kind of person. Paul recently shared a book he was reading on LinkedIn and sparked both an interesting conversation and this podcast interview. So, hi, Paul. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Hey, Kelly. It's great to be with you.
So I shared the fact that you read, and I talked a little bit about what your job is now. But for listeners, is there anything else you want to share about your professional journey to this point?
So I started my procurement career in the fashion industry, which is a great kind of frenetic pace to learn the ropes. So in addition to cutting my teeth with everything that most junior procurement people do, it opened me up to sort of an entrepreneurial spirit of, hey, procurement person, or we want to do a sample sale open to the public for the first time ever. Go figure that out. And so like stuff like that was like really open my eyes. That made me think, wow, procurement really is like a little bit of everything, which turned out to be true. So that really got me hooked on the industry. And from there, I was able to progress into financial services where I've spent most of my career. But I still wax poetically about my few years in the fashion industry where it all started.
Well, and speaking of waxing poetic, you also find time to read. Yes. And I think people may be interested to find that the book we're going to talk about is not, it's not something from the HBR reading list. It's not the latest top business title. It's not the Elon Musk biography.
Right.
We're actually going to take on something a little bit more philosophical today. So the book that you shared on LinkedIn was Ikigai, which is the Japanese secret to living a long and happy life. And we're actually going to acknowledge right up front, you've also checked out the audiobook. The author says Ikigai, but other people have a different pronunciation. So yes, we're going to go Ikigai. If you say Ikigai, you're still welcome to listen and we would still want to hear from you, but we're following the author's lead.
And this may not be the last Japanese word I mispronounced during our conversation. So just full disclosure, please.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to attempt any others. So you're one ahead of me there. But tell us a little bit about the book. And in fact, I think there's also a sequel that you're reading as well.
Yes. The follow-up book is it's kind of like a workbook companion to the book. So a lot of people, when they read the book, had great feedback, but then said, well, how do I put this into action? So the book is really about living a purposeful life, where it breaks down into four quadrants. Like what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you get paid for? So it's kind of like a self-assessment to figure out what it is that really drives you and how you can live a balanced and happy existence throughout your whole life. So it's kind of part taking inventory of everything you do to figure out what creates a spark in you, but also doing that inventory to think, do I need to make incremental improvements towards where I want to go? Or do I really need to make a paradigm shift to be where I want to be? It's very interesting. It's half philosophy and half kind of deconstruction of your being, really.
But I like the fact that it acknowledges that we do have to get paid because eating and having a home are really nice.
I love that. Yeah, my wife does too. And so does the dog. So everyone, has been happy with this rhythm so far.
Exactly. Now, I'm interested about how this particular message connects with you where you are, whether it's in your personal journey, your professional journey, or in the intertwining of the two. How does this concept really resonate for you?
I think it is in the intertwining of the two. I mean, procurement people are used to delivering value, and I can take great pride in the accomplishments that I've had. With, the fiduciary responsibility that we have to companies, and that's all great, and the stuff to be very proud of in your career. But at a certain point, also, you want to kind of you think about legacy. You think about the legacy that you leave as a person. But also, everybody wants a balanced life. I think it's a non-controversial statement, right? You want a balanced existence, a balanced existence of purpose as well as professional enrichment. And so it's a great opportunity to when I walk home every day from work, I go by a church that feeds the homeless and they feed hungry people. It's a sobering experience, right? Because I think to myself, I'm rattling off the day's events, but then you hit this reality and you go, okay, well, is there any way that I can do something about this, or apply what I know to help people? I think that's just a natural extension of where I'm at right now in terms of, how can I do more? How can I do something more? How can I lend my procurement skills maybe to something that's more purpose driven, right?
Well, and you're fortunate in that you're able to walk home from work. I mean, granted, I say that having a home office, walking home from work means sort of going over there to the kitchen. But even the fact that you're able to connect with the larger world and give yourself that mind space or head space to what are other people's days like, or, have that time of separation from desk to home. Being thoughtful, it connects to that idea of being purposeful. And to your point, where can I apply my skills to help others?
And mindfulness is a big part of what they talk about in Ikigai in terms of finding flow and really appreciating moment. They talk a lot about staying present. And one of the greatest techniques, that's going to sound so weird to you, Kelly, but I encourage you to try it because I've been doing it lately, is they say one of the chapters in the follow-up book talks about trying, like, if you want to try and get present very quickly, try writing a haiku. And I was like, okay. But let me tell you, when you do it, it's very centering. Even if you are not a great haiku writer, which I am not, but even if you write about the most mundane thing, it forces your brain into where am I right now? And that's, I think, for a lot of people, you can get caught up in a whirlwind of just life and happening. And so that is a great exercise that I've learned to sort of allow me to snap back and kind of center myself. So
yeah. Well, okay, Paul, maybe it's because it's early in the years we're recording this and I'm still feeling like aspirational, hasn't all been beat out of me yet. I am going to accept your challenge. Now, I was an English major, so I've done the haiku route. It's been a long time. I'm going to look back up the syllables.
Okay.
I am going to write you a haiku for this episode.
Okay.
How's that?
It's 575 for the
Awesome.
Okay.
You saved me the time of looking it up. Okay, so if you're listening to this audio, make sure you look at the show notes. Paul's custom haiku is down there in the show notes. Go take a look. And bonus credits for anybody, say on LinkedIn or Twitter where you find this. Share your own haiku back. Maybe we could publish a book of procurement haiku, Paul.
But I just want to make sure, you said you're going to write one too, right? Not just me, because I'm ready. But
I'm going to write one
too. Okay.
Oh, you're going to write. Excellent. So we're going to have a haiku exchange. This will be the first for me. And I think you tricked me into attempting another Japanese word. So well done. Well done. We're now 2 for 2, I think. Now, you talked a minute ago about flow.
Mm-hmm.
And just to sort of keep this coming back to procurement, one of the things we talk about constantly is people falling into procurement. I fell into procurement. I believe you fell into procurement. Yeah. Philip Eidson always starts podcast interviews by saying, did you find procurement or did procurement find you? We're still in single digits, I think, after even like 1.5 million downloads of the show of people that chose to work in procurement. But what we never think about is whether people are falling out. And so the question of talent and retention comes up. Based on your experience, do you think we need to be putting more intentionality, to stay on theme, around the people that are currently in procurement and making sure that if they want to stay, that we are retaining them by keeping it interesting and giving them opportunities? Is that something we need to put more focus on?
Yeah, I think there's never been a better spotlight on talent in the industry. I mean, you can throw a rock and hit 100 good procurement people on LinkedIn. So it's never been a matter in the last 10 years of where is the talent, right? But that issue of how to retain. And so as you meet more procurement people and see what drives them, I think it is that it's about giving them the opportunity to grow. I mean, still in the theme of the book that we're talking about too, right? It's about treating people like people and not corporate resources, right? Because not everybody, my experience in working with a lot of interns too, some of the best people that have worked for me have not been procurement people. So I've been able to have talent on my team that, students that are economics majors or people who don't even know what procurement is. But when you have a good base, you can teach the necessary skills to do the work, but it's the right, finding people with the right attitude. I think the future though of retaining talent is about creating that trajectory for people, because procurement is more involved than ever in every facet of the business. So now that opens up a lot of pathways to, maybe procurement wanting to transition into COO roles or something like that, because you get that holistic view of the whole organization. You're well equipped to transition into any of those roles. So it's about keeping an open mind. It's okay if someone doesn't want to be with you for 10 years. You could get the best 3 years out of someone, and then that's okay too.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because it's also a sort of a two-sided effort, because the procurement leaders and the company and different parts of the business should be mindful about talent and retention and creating these opportunities. But each individual employee should also be purposeful in their career and take advantage of opportunities. I mean, a lot of times you can tour things, you can do rotations in the company, you might be able to participate in some kind of third-party educational program, not just going to work every day and saying, oh, okay, what do I need to do in what order? What Zoom meetings or Teams meetings do I need to be in today? But thinking, what interests me? Do I have the opportunity to call up a cool supplier and say, hey, can I come for a plant tour and see how you're doing things? Even when I think back to my time in procurement, because I got my start in grocery retail, and I worked for the company that at the time, if anybody's East Coast, Stop and Shop, Giant Landover, Tops, there were a number of chains. I remember the day they said to us at headquarters, hey, does anybody want to go see where we turn the bananas yellow? And I was like the first person putting my hand, I want to go see how you turn the bananas yellow. And it ended up becoming sad, maybe, but a story to tell my kids. Do you know how those bananas, do you know what happens? Like, they have these big, weird garage doors and the bananas all go in, and then there's like gas and it's something to the bananas. But taking that opportunity, did I need to see how bananas turn yellow in order to source pest control services for 200 grocery stores? No. But it was an opportunity to go learn something, to be actively curious, to experience something. But you have to look for those things, don't you?
Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk always likes to say that leaders work for their teams, pardon me, and not the other way around, right? So it's up to leaders to really get to know their people, and I think that's something that's very it can be difficult in certain companies. And so once you know what makes people tick, you can identify those opportunities. When I first started working for Douglas Elliman, I was working with we had a media team that produced a magazine, and they wanted to do a plant tour where the magazine was going to be printed. So we drove to upstate in Saratoga. It was a blast. I've been buying print for years, and yet being there in the warehouse, watching the presses go, I mean, it adds a new dimension. So you have to kind of figure out what makes people tick and what's going to create that spark for them that helps take them in a new direction.
Well, and to your point earlier, you talked about how many different parts of the business procurement has the opportunity to impact, even to the point that you could go in an operations direction. But we have to be thinking that way. It's not just about updating spreadsheets or getting something through an RFP process. It's how does this at the end of the day impact the business as a whole? And going to see bananas or going to see a supplier's print capabilities, I think it brings it home. It might feel like, oh gosh, why did I sign up for this? I'm so busy and now I have to drive to this place and go to this plant. But being there, feet on the ground, sort of makes it real, lets you see how much detail goes into all of the things that we're trying to capture in those spreadsheets.
After this interview, I'm also going to look at what makes bananas yellow, by the way, because now you've really piqued my interest. Like, I can't stop thinking about that now.
So, Paul, we've talked about sort of philosophy and experience and some of the things that procurement professionals and leaders need to be mindful of. But I'm interested about what your favorite part about working in procurement happens to be.
So I know when a lot of people are asked this question, they say variety, and it normally would be my first answer. But as I think more about it, it's more about agency, which is a slight offshoot of that, which is in a lot of jobs, it's kind of like an assembly line, right? If you're an accountant, and I love accountants, I don't want to run afoul, but your work is predictable, you know what you're going to do, and you just have to process as much of that work as you can. In procurement, you have an opportunity to kind of put your stamp on something because your creativity and your experiences can imprint on how you approach solutions. And I think that to me is what that plus variety kind of combined into something where every day there's an element of, I wonder what's going to happen today. And so that sometimes the answer to that question is very bad. And sometimes, but at least you can wake up and know that you're going to have an opportunity to deliver value to the business, and you probably have to be creative in how you approach it as well.
Yeah, no,
that to me is the
absolutely.
most important thing.
And sort of then maybe coming full circle. So when you talked about the 4 quadrants of what's covered by the Ikigai
Mm-hmm.
philosophy on purposeful life, you talked about what are you good at, what do you enjoy, but you did also talk about what can you get paid to do, and that is part of our day-to-day reality. So I'd be interested, based on having read the book and spent some time with the workbook, what your advice would be around connecting what we like or what we love and what we're good at with something that people are willing to pay money to us to do for a living.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the first part of the answer is to kind of do a Pareto analysis of your career and think about, like, every job is going to have some amount of work that you just absolutely don't like, and everyone tries to minimize their exposure to that element, whether it's busy work or cold calling or whatever it is. I think, but like, I talk to a lot of procurement people, and we talk about, well, what are your aspirations and things like that. And not every procurement person's aspiration, since they're good at procurement, is to say, well, I want to be a consultant in procurement, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to sort of take a step back, almost go back to your, like, what created a spark in you as a child, right? And think, what do I like to do? Do I like to do work with, woodworking? Am I a musician? And I mean, yes, the answer to the how do I make money off that is more difficult. But I think it's important to do that 80-20 analysis to say, what are the moments in my day or week that really create a spark that say, wow, I love this part. I love negotiating, or I love this. And then you kind of have to do some soul searching to figure out, it may not be about making as much money as you make now to drive that kind of spark in you that creates that ikigai for you. It may be, in the example that I gave you before, maybe you like negotiating and you're good at it, and you can help people negotiate, help low-income people negotiate mortgages or something like that. Like, I'm kind of like mashing up 2 elements, but that's really what it's about. It's about, well, what drives you and what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to help people? Do you want to, entertain people? Do you, it's really, the book talks a lot about stripping down that every piece of what drives you to figure out how you can reconstruct it. And I think the important thing to emphasize is that your ikigai changes, as you go through life. So when I was 16, I really wanted to be a musician, and now I won't tell you how old I am, and I don't know what I want to do. But so it's important to kind of be kind to yourself, to say it's okay. And I maybe mispronounce another Japanese term here, but wabi sabi, which they reference slightly in the book, is about imperfection is okay, right? It's appreciating imperfection, and I think that's an important part of it too. Everybody sees social media and sees people who have 1 million followers and 18 shows and streams of income, and they think, oh my God, like, I'm not doing that, so what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's about finding something that drives you that's simple, and focusing on that and cultivating that joy. And the last piece, I think, is also about community. You want to find like-minded people who you can just be supported by, because that's the people who live in the book. When they talk about people who live long lives up to through 100 years old, they have very defined communities and roles in those communities. It's never about people stopping working to some degree. No one's kind of sitting on the beach sipping Mai Tais, and it's always about having purpose through work and finding joy in some type of labor. So.
And I think the nice thing is, this is sort of the opposite of what we talked about before, all the things you can do with experience or a job in procurement. But there's also a lot of different opportunities within procurement. There are technical things, data things, creative things, people person things, high stress things, if that happens to be your favorite. And so focusing around what brings you joy and what you're good at, chances are you can even stay inside of procurement and find a way to do more of that.
And if you even flip the script, like given the example of someone who maybe likes music, and again, this is not sort of a money-making scheme for life, but you can find ways to inject your interests into elements of your work that maybe drive that spark that you have. So if you like producing music, maybe you can do, at my company, they asked me to help them edit the podcast that they did a few years ago during COVID. I loved it, right? So it kind of, it scratched the itch that I have for music, but it's not like I'm going to go out and publicize that I edited the podcast, but it really made me happy to do it. So you have to look at, like you said, you have to keep your eyes and ears open for those opportunities to do things that kind of go into that lane that drives you.
Absolutely. Now, Paul, one of the traditions we have here on The Sourcing Hero is every guest's first time on the show, I give you a pairing of questions. So I'm going to give you two options. You can answer whichever one you want, and there is no such thing as a wrong answer. So whatever brings you joy from this pair and whatever answer you want to share is the right one. And it does not have to be in haiku format. You can just, we won't hold you to the syllables. So here are your options. What does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? Or if you want to broaden it a little bit, what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
Yeah, I think I would take the second question. I think for me, heroism, and especially in a procurement role, procurement is often in the challenger position. Why do we do this? Why are we doing things this way? And I think that you'll come across, in the course of your fiduciary responsibility to the company, you'll come across a lot of situations where it's important to say, why are we doing this? Because it's very easy to go with the flow and go where the current takes you because it's your job. But it's more important to stick up for what's right in your eyes without, you don't want to be a rabble rouser, but you want to try and build a reputation for challenging for the right reasons, right? Not just, well, because it costs less, but what's the right thing to do? Who are we as a team and as a company, and what do we stand for? For me, that's about looking out for people, right? It's about getting to know your team, getting to know your colleagues and what drives them too, because happy people that are self-actualized are going to be the best employees you've ever had. And people that are micromanaged and thumbed, kept under a thumb are not going to be happy. They're not going to want to stay. So I think there's a happy medium there for sticking up for what's good for people in general, even if it means they're not going to be around for the long term because their dream is to do something else. But to have an open discussion to say, this is okay and this is what we stand for. So challenging is, to me, the act of a corporate hero.
Well, Paul, this has been a fascinating conversation, sort of some of the things we talk about a lot, some of the things we have absolutely never talked about before. And I appreciate you being here to share so much of yourself, not just professionally, but also personally.
I've had a great time. Thank you, Kelly.
Absolutely. If people that listened in are interested in connecting with you, maybe finding out what you're reading, what is the best way for them to get in touch?
So paulnilsen.com links to my LinkedIn. So Nilsen, and that's the best way to connect with me. I'm also going to be reading 24 books this year. I've given myself a challenge. So if you want to see what I'm reading, I'm going a little overboard, having upped my ante. So 24 books this year, and trying to post about 7 things that I learned from each of them. So I've got 2 in the hopper for January. I'm ready to go.
Well, good for you, Paul. I look forward to finding out what you read, what you thought, what you learned. Maybe we'll check in with you later in the year and see how you did.
All right. Sounds great, Kelly.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well and always remember that you can be a hero too.